Welcome to This Week in Crazy America. This week we have a couple gets it on with a dog. Man helps his son attack a classmate. A counter-reaction to Black Lives Matter. And a woman fights off a bear with her laptop. Now, before we get into the stories, please take a minute to push the subscribe button below and sign up for the weekly updates of all the crazy stories from across America and the other videos that we post regularly throughout the week. Now, without any further ado, let's get into the stories. So the sickest folks of this week, without a doubt, and probably the sickest folks we've seen in a long time, scratch that, probably the sickest folks we've seen ever, well, they're a couple who face charges for having sex with their dog. Yes, folks. You heard right. This is a really hard tale to tell. We believe, thank God, that the dog in question is now okay. He's been rescued by the animal rescue and taken away from his wayward and disgusting owners. In fact, they're likely to have plenty of time in jail soon to think about the horrific things they did to that poor animal. So, we don't know that much about the story, and even if we did, we probably couldn't go into too many details. But what we do know is that it involved a woman called Nolene Horn, 44 years old, and her partner, Christopher Jones, 50 years old. Now, Horn and Jones have become the first people ever indicted in the state of Kentucky under a brand new law against bestiality. And let's hope they may well be the first and the last, but I don't think we can bank on that. The state attorney general in Kentucky is a guy called Daniel Cameron, and he's pretty bullish about securing a conviction on this one, what he calls an obscene and heinous crime. Let's see how he gets on. In California, meanwhile, a woman had a very different kind of encounter with an animal. The unnamed lady was taking an evening nap in her backyard in Sierra Madre when she was awakened to the sensation of someone chewing on her leg. To her absolute terror, it wasn't just her friendly little dog or even her husband, but it was a brown bear, folks. Yeah, brown bear. A bear who obviously thought he'd found dinner. So reacting instinctively, the woman picked up the nearest thing to hand, which happened to be her laptop, and she bashed that bear over the head with it. And thankfully, that scared the critter away, and the woman was okay. A few chew marks, a few bite marks on her leg, but nothing she can't come back from. Things could easily have been so much worse. Now, another story, pretty shocking. A man in Washington State tore up pretty much every parenting manual there is. What did he do? He helped his son pummel and stab the son's 12-year-old rival. So the man in his 40s, name of Martinez D. Mitchell, he helped his son, who's also 12 years of age, inflict serious injuries on the victim. So he pretty much held this other kid down and let his son hit him and stab him. Absolutely terrible behaviour. Now, the two preteens, the two 12-year-olds, were said to have had a long-standing bitter rivalry. That may be one thing, but obviously what Mitchell Sr. did goes completely beyond the pale. The situation called for Mitchell Sr. to be the grown-up in the room, not to act like another juvenile. But unfortunately, acting like another juvenile is exactly what he did, and now both father and son face charges in the attack. Now, another story about people or someone losing their cool. We all know there are lots of guns in Texas. That's not news. Having said that, the reaction of one drunk to being refused admission to a bar in San Antonio, well, it was still pretty shocking, folks. After hearing no from the bouncer when he tried to get in, the loon went back to his car, retrieved a long gun, I'm not kidding, a long gun, marched back up to the bar. This guy pulls the gun out and just started shooting indiscriminately outside the bar. That's what you could call beer rage. Absolutely terrible He wounded 8 people. Fortunately, and this is through no virtue of his, the guy didn't kill anyone. As of the time we reported the story earlier this week, he was still on the run. We're staying on top of this, but let's hope they catch him. Certainly, let's hope they catch him before it's time for his next drink. Now, of even more concern this week, and as you know, if you follow this channel, we don't go into political events very often, except when we can't avoid them, because they're part of what's going on in crazy America. So of even more concern this week was the mounting evidence that there is a sinister counter-reaction to the explosion of the Black Lives Matter movement across America. Now, we don't take a political view on it, one way or the other. We know it's very polarizing, and some people believe passionately in it. Some people don't agree with the way it's going. We don't get involved in that. But what we saw this week was very disturbing. We saw a story about a burning cross placed in the yard of a young activist, a young Black Lives Matter activist. 17-year-old Trayvon Brown, who'd organized a protest in his hometown of Marion in Virginia, was the target. Yeah, he was the target of this, I guess you could say, Ku Klux Klan style intimidation, the placing of the burning cross in his yard. I think it would have terrified a lot of us. Remarkably, this young man stood firm. He said he's unafraid, he's not going to be intimidated, and he'll keep doing what he's doing. I guess in some ways more power to him. Now, still disturbing, and in similar vein, albeit slightly more comical, is another story we have. And this story was about a man who was spotted wearing KKK robes, so there's obviously a bit of a theme here, wearing Klan robes in Wisconsin. And not only was he wearing the Klan robes, he was taking his dog for a walk, as you do, a casual walk of the dog in your Klan robes. Now, the man was later named and shamed as Charles Michael Booth. But the crazy thing here, folks, was that not only did he put the outfit on, he felt relaxed enough to wave at his neighbours and others that he encountered on his stroll with the dog. Now, in an age of increasing polarization, and we're seeing a lot of these incidents, let's hope one thing. Let's hope that this is not the new normal. Now, finally, for this week's folks, perhaps the least surprising news that we have this week is that Americans, all Americans, are more miserable than they've been for decades. And we learned this from a new poll that found that just 14% of American adults say they're very happy. And that's down from 31% who said the same in 2018. And this poll was taken mostly over May, so it was a few weeks ago. In 2018, 23% of American adults polled said they'd often or sometimes felt isolated in recent weeks. Now, it's more than double that. It's 50%, half the American population that say they feel isolated. And it's not surprising, as we say, because we've got a lot of things going on. We had the COVID pandemic. We have political polarization. We have protests and riots sweeping the country. As we saw this week, we've got a counter-reaction to those riots, which in some ways is looking quite sinister. But before we go, folks, just remember this, and this is very important. However bad things seem in crazy America, one thing is always going to be true. They've been 10 times worse in recent human history, both in this country and across the world. And so the message that we want you to take away is this too will pass. Let's keep our heads up. And that's all we've got time for you this week, folks. Before we go, do remember, push that subscribe button below and sign up for these weekly updates and all the other videos we put out. And we'll see you same time, same place next week. Bye for now.
Well, we used to know them, what the whole